All right. Well, the Premier League season is back underway, and I know I said I was going to be doing these Prem reviews back on camera or back as part of a live stream. Obviously, I haven't had time to do that for the first 2 weeks of the season, so let's just get caught up with the results, and then I guess normal service will be resumed. I don't know where to start, but let's just, I guess, start with Newcastle and Aston Villa, maybe the most bombastic game on the opening day of the season, which was the 12th of August. Newcastle at home. There's a lot of expectations around the club this season. Obviously, they've gone out and they've signed a number of quality players to the squad. Maybe not as many as you need when you have a Champions League campaign on the go, but certainly the quality of the squad that was top four last season has improved. And they were taking on Aston Villa, who were revelatory under Unai Emery last season. The first half of this game really was a tale of two halves, this match. I mean, you end up with it being 5-1 to Newcastle, which is like, I don't know, it's kind of insane that was a thing that happened, because it's not reflective of the totality of the 90 minutes of football at all. But yeah, basically, the first problem Villa had, and I talked about this in a previous episode, but Buendia was absolutely bossing pre-season. I mean, in the pre-season games in America, Buendia was the standout player for Villa. I mean, he was unfucking real. There's this weird spate of like knee injuries going around that I can't quite explain. Lots of fucking ACL problems and just knee blowouts. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if there is some sort of, new type of boots or grass. I don't know. But loads of people have been out for long term with these knee injuries, and it's happening in the women's game too. Probably just a coincidence, but yeah, Buendia is going to be a huge loss for Villa at the start of the season. If he could have carried on his preseason form, this game probably looks very different. But on top of that, in the first half, Tyrone Mings gets another serious injury. Again, it looks to be knee-related, I think. He's going to be out for some time because of how Emery sets up his Villa team to play this coordinated offside trap with a high line, which is very effective when it works and a fucking disaster when it doesn't. You bring on a defender that maybe isn't as good as Tyrone Mings, and suddenly you end up with what happened, which was Newcastle were constantly able to get behind that high line. And Newcastle is a team filled with pace now. I know that Newcastle sold St. Maximin. He's obviously gone to the Saudi League. A lot of people think we're going to miss. See, I'm saying we. I'm trying not to do that so much this season. I'm trying to let Newcastle go. They're Saudi now. St. Maximin, a lot of fans thought he was going to be a big miss, and I'm not feeling that at all, actually. I think he'd fallen into a trap, being very flash, but with not a lot of end product. I think, players were figuring him out a little bit. He was still capable of beating a man, but his final ball and his shooting just wasn't quite there for the amount of chances and space he could create. So, it's okay, actually. We sold him for peanuts because it was a Saudi on Saudi favour. Don't think we're going to miss him at all. And I look at Tonali and Guimaraes in the centre of the park, and I just think Tonali's debut was, it's as good a Premier League debut for that type of midfielder as you're going to see. He was involved in everything, gets a goal. Just really going to be a huge player for Newcastle. And obviously as well, Isak is a player that had injury problems last season, but when he came into the team, looked like he could lead a line and was going to be very prolific. If he stays injury-free this season, this is a 20-goal season for him, maybe 25, it could be that good. It looks to be very clinical, very good with the ball, very good at beating a man, and still lots and lots of development to take place. So Newcastle look to be in a good spot, but the problem that they've got is very thin squad still. It's going to be a real problem if they pick up a few injuries along the way. As we know with the Premier League season, it is long, it is hard. You add midweek games into that, and suddenly, you're going to struggle. It's my bet, and you might have seen this already by now. I will have recorded my predictions and everything by now, but it's my bet that they're not going to get top four again this season. I know that's crazy to say after they started 5-1, but we'll get to it when we talk about the City game in the next week as to why I just don't think they're going to be able to sustain that, particularly with the Champions League games in there. What I'll say now is Villa would have been one of my picks to, 7th or 6th in the league. I think they could really build on what they did last season. I think they made some decent signings, but unfortunately, losing Buendia for maybe until the end of the year and Mings maybe till the end of the year. We don't know when they're going to get back. There's kind of an open-ended date on it at the moment. Those are just two huge players for Aston Villa. As good as their squad might be, as good as Emery might be, you can't legislate for those kind of losses. And unfortunately, more often than not, the teams that do well in the Prem and the teams that manage to get into Europe and the Champions League, they're the ones that avoid the injuries. And Villa have been brutally unlucky right at the start of the season, which is a shame for them. Anyway, just to wrap this up, it wasn't a 5-1 game based on the first half. Newcastle ran away with it at the end, but Aston Villa looked competitive, and as we'll get to, they dominated Everton in the second week, and obviously are still going to be better than a lot of the teams that will eventually finish below them in the league. Another game that's just worth briefly talking about, I think Luton are in for a long, hard season. We didn't talk a lot about Brighton and Hove Albion relative to their talents, but we certainly should this season. I think the secret is kind of out now about Brighton, that they're just the best run football club in the Prem, maybe even in Europe. They have this consistent scouting approach, which is actually putting them in a great financial position because, as you'll know by now, they've sold Caicedo for 115 million, but, that's like 100 plus million profit. There's other players that are going to do well for Brighton that are coming through that probably won't be at Brighton in 2-3 years, but are going to go for huge transfer fees. Brighton's financials are going to be absolutely amazing. And, I'd like to see them get into Europe this season. I've predicted them to do it. I think they will. I think Graham Potter took a lot of the credit for how Brighton played, but I think we can see under De Zerbi. If you want to be generous to Potter, you would say it's an excellent continuation of Potter's system and the players have responded well to that. Or you can maybe say that maybe Graham Potter got a lot of credit he didn't deserve because actually it's a fantastic squad and a well-run football club. Now, you don't need to necessarily take a stance on that because I don't know how much we can really glean about Graham Potter as a manager because Chelsea is a fucking mess. This was 4-1 to Brighton. It's a tough start for Luton. Luton are really going to struggle in the Prem. I think Luton are going to they have more chance of being rock bottom than Bournemouth did last season. I think overall the quality in the lower half of the Prem is a bit reduced. In the bottom half of the Prem is a bit reduced this season. I think there are a lot of bad teams, but not so bad that Luton have a chance of staying up. And this is just a brutal awakening. Like, this wasn't even tier 1 Brighton play. Brighton made a lot of mistakes, gave the ball away a lot, didn't really run away with it until they got the pen in the 71st minute, which we're going to segue into talking about that in a moment. It was a very soft penalty, and then leveled up by the ref like 10 minutes later with another, shouldn't have been a penalty. Overall, everything here suggests that not only are Brighton going to do very well this season, they also can be in cruise control against the lower opposition now. Like, a hungry Luton Town at home for Brighton is nothing to be afraid of anymore. In fact, you don't even need to bring your A game. The players are just that good. And, Matoma was looking great. João Pedro obviously made his, Brighton debut, and he was big money signing by Brighton standards. He's been in the Prem before with Watford and didn't impress me much, but he's still very young. He is still a bit rough around the edges for me. I thought in this performance, it's good he's got a penalty to settle his confidence because he was far from a prolific goal scorer in Watford. I think he only got one goal in the Prem during his stint with Watford. And, he's looked good. He's looked solid in the Championship, but as we all know, the level change is insane. And so I think João Pedro's, he's a player I've got my eye on this season. I don't think he's going to be very prolific. He's not that kind of player, but he might not need to be prolific in a Brighton side that's got Ferguson playing there as well, and March, and goals from the midfield. They're just a delight to watch. Welbeck was good in pre-season as well, it's got to be said. And again, I think with his experience, he always adds a dimension to the team. So yeah, Luton, long season ahead. Brighton, very, very good value for the 4-1, even in second gear. Now, I did say I'll segue into talking about it's an old favourite. I just want to talk about the referees. This game will highlight that the refs have learned nothing. I mean, the interesting thing is there's like a fucking scandal kind of, coming out at the moment, which I might talk about in a supplemental. We've had this issue. Mike Dean, who's doing the VAR now, obviously was a ref for fucking 28 years or something. He's now doing the VAR, and he just admitted that he didn't correct a mistake in a match because he didn't want to give the ref, Anthony Taylor, a personal friend, grief. And this was back in 2022 in the Chelsea-Tottenham draw. You've got refs saying this out loud. Like, I don't know how he can work ever again. He's been bumped down. He got bumped down for like 2 months or something. Like, this is disqualifying for me. He shouldn't have any place near a Premier League game ever again. I mean, how are you meant to enforce a appreciable standard of refereeing if you've got refs coming out and admitting, yeah, we didn't use the tools at our disposal properly because we don't like it when fans and players are mean to referees. Respect campaign. This is why I fucking loathe Premier League referees. It's like, we all know what you're doing. We can all see it. There's no excuse for a wrong decision. You've got a huge window after a contentious decision happens on the field to walk over and review it in a slow motion, multi-angle fucking replay with someone with even more views than you in your ear giving you advice who has refereeing experience. And there's just no excuse, guys. There's no excuse to get this wrong. And so in Brighton, we had two, just insane shit penalties. The first was João Pedro just went down, did the old dragging leg trick. That shouldn't have happened. That was really unlucky for Luton. But I'll also add the handball that they gave against Brighton. It was a fizzed cross. The player dived to stop it, had his back to the ball, had his arms up. It hit the underside of the backside of his arm. He couldn't have done anything about it, and they gave a fucking handball. And as we're going to get into, there was another identical example which wasn't given against Everton in the Everton-Fulham game. It was almost identical, back of the arm. And what's mental is you're watching these games, you're like, what is going on? I mean, Declan Rice as well had a back of the arm handball where he jumped up with his arms. Now, keeping in mind, when they say when you jump with your arms, if the ball hits your arm, because you are physically jumping with your arms and using your arms for fucking leverage in the air, that's meant to count because you haven't put your hands by your side. Declan Rice just gets away with that. And what's mental is in both of those examples, the Everton game and the Arsenal game, the fucking commentators are going, yeah, well, it's hit the back of the arm, so you can't give those. Very sensible by the ref, although the other team might feel aggrieved. And you go, where was that energy in the Brighton game? So immediately out the gate, we've got this inconsistent refereeing approach, and it's going to fuck up the whole season. It's going to fuck up the whole Prem again, because we're going to have referees that have got the rules are subject to interpret. Stop giving these dickheads room to interpret things, because they can't interpret things correctly, even with all the tools. Let's just make it absolutely clear. I would rather just have a die-hard rule that if it hits your arm in any way, it's a handball. It won't be fair. Penalties will skyrocket, but at least refs can't get it wrong. At least refs can't give, their own internal biases that they pretend they're above, room to fucking colour the shape of the Prem. And remember, it does matter. Brighton most likely would have been in Europe and would have finished higher up the table. Brighton had something like 5 refereeing errors given against them that cost them points. And I hate morons who say, these things level out over the course of the season. There is no cosmic law at play. There is no such thing as karma. It doesn't fucking work, right? These things don't level out over the course of the season. Objectively, there is no reason why they would. What you have to do is stop letting referees ruin games. And stop putting this onus on, oh, it's bad when a manager doesn't respect the ref. It's bad when players complain about the ref. You must always respect the ref. I'll start respecting referees, and everyone will start respecting referees when they get the decisions right. And right now, there's no reason to be getting this many decisions wrong. So the Premier League remains the best league in the world with some of the worst refereeing I've seen. And the opening week doesn't fucking disprove that in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, we did allude to a little bit of Arsenal. We'll talk about their debut. Arsenal haven't been great out the gate this season, but they have managed to grind out 2 wins against lower opposition. Nottingham Forest was a bit of a weird one. It was 2-1 to Arsenal. Like sort of a classic last season, end of last season Arsenal performance, except obviously they got the result. But they were in total control. They came out the gates. They were really strong. Great goals, you got Nketiah getting a goal, Martinelli with a wicked assist, Saliba's back in the team, comfortable at the back. You got Saka, he just scored an absolute fucking perler in this game. Saka's going to be one of the best wingers in the world again. There's no reason why this should turn bad. But towards the end of the match, Arteta was trying to be clever. Arteta was trying to do something with the squad. It was a bit weird. He had Partey kind of at right back, and then Partey was coming and stepping into midfield when they were on an attack, so they could go with a back three. And so they used to do this with Zinchenko coming in and doing it from the left, and it worked. But it wasn't working with Partey. Partey and Rice were getting in each other's way. They were occupying similar space, and they couldn't get like any dynamic play going. It wasn't fast. It wasn't quick. There wasn't any long counter-attacks going. It was a lot of sideways passing. It was the David Batty masterclass. Completely, let's keep the ball. Loads of possession. I mean, they had insane possession in this game, Arsenal. It was something like almost 80%, right? And they didn't manage a lot of shots. But, at the end of the day, it wasn't... They didn't cut Forest apart. And when they did concede a goal, and it's got to be said, I mean, look, Awani was my man of the match, although Alanga had a very good game. Between the two of them, they had this counter-attack that got going, and Awani got a goal, and suddenly Arsenal were in trouble. Now, obviously, I put Declan Rice on fraud watch out. Nobody agrees with that at all, but I'm sick of these English players like Rice and Mason Mount commanding these exorbitant fees. And, don't tell me you wouldn't have, again, for example, Tonali over Mason Mount. Right, don't tell me that, because I don't believe you. You look at the price these players are going for. Declan Rice is not a £100 million plus player for me. He's not. I think he's a very overrated player. I think he's a solid... I thought there was this interesting segment that they did on Sky Sports, and I think it was Gary Neville, and they were talking about who they would compare him to, and they looked at his stats relative to Keane and Vieira, the two masters, the archetypal, masters in the Rice position. And it just wasn't even close in terms of the stats, the numbers, the production. Declan Rice is good at breaking up play and good at accurate passing. And maybe that's all he needs to do. But then Gary Neville said, I wouldn't compare him to Keane. I wouldn't compare him to Vieira. For me, he's more like an Essien. And I think that's disrespectful to Essien. I thought Essien was a barnstorming player. Essien had fucking goals in him too, man. He used to fucking score, some absolute screamers. I don't know if Rice is going to do much of that for Arsenal. And I got to say, when they needed to break up Forest, towards the end, Forest were the better team for the last 10, 15 minutes of this game. I thought Rice went missing a little bit. I thought overall, yeah, great stats, good, solid debut. But that's when you need somebody to step up, and that's my problem with Declan Rice. I don't think he has a gear where he can get to God tier, take over a game. I don't think he has that. I think he's a solid defensive midfielder that relies on the fact he's an England international to kind of elevate his reputation, and his performances don't do that. I never see it. I remember, the fucking midfield destroyers that would take over the game. You know who they are. You know what they used to do. A tackle, a long ball, a break-in run from midfield, sudden man-to-man marking, a fucking scything challenge to fire everybody up. Declan Rice ain't got none of this. So, I don't know. He's going to be a good player for Arsenal. He's definitely what they need. He's obviously going to be the long-term solution. Partey's probably gone. end of this season. He was disappointing here. And they've got other options now that they can swap around. But, I mean, this Arsenal didn't look great here. They held on at the end. It's 2-1. It's a winning start to your campaign. But, in the second week, I think you're right to have some questions by the time we get there. The other problem with Arsenal is the loss of Jurriën Timber to another. It's confirmed it's an ACL tear. Jurriën Timber was Arsenal's best signing for me in the summer, and he was going to be huge for them, big for the program, like an elegant but strong young defender with energy and positional awareness and good feet. He was going to be ideal for Arsenal, tailor-made, and for him to blow his ACL at 22, making his debut for Arsenal, it fucking sucks. It really does. I hope he comes back, but the problem with these types of injury is you never know. You never know. They take so long to get over. He could, it could end him as the player he was at Ajax. Who knows? So that's a huge loss for Arsenal. Super unlucky. So under those circumstances, maybe you can pat yourselves on the back for the win. Let's talk about Everton. We'll go back to back here. Everton are in fucking trouble. I mean, they're in trouble again this season. The only reason I'm not predicting them to go down is just because, I'm a big believer in Dyche, but I think Dyche actually, he's got one of the most insane jobs in football now, because this rebuild they're having to do, if you don't know what's going on in the background, Everton are being investigated for financial fair play because of the money they've spent. This is like over $500 million. In a relatively short period of time. They've bought garbage with it, and now they're trying to nickel and dime to offset the financial fair play. And I'm telling you, this was a side that needed 3 or 4 players to stay up. So Dyche is going to have to work a miracle. They lost 1-0 to Fulham, who've got their own problems, which we'll talk about in a moment. Maupay is... what is he? He's one of the worst signings in Premier League history, is what he is. And Everton needed a striker. Like, I haven't even looked at the stats, but I think it's something like in 40 appearances, he's like scored 1 goal. It's embarrassing. And he missed some sitters in this game. It's unbelievable how bad he is. They spent it was 10, 11 mil or something on him. Like, fuck me. There's options out there that they could get. Now they're looking at Shea Adams from Southampton. That ain't it, Chief. He might be an improvement on Maupay, but as we established with the Southampton campaign, if you're relying on Shea Adams to get you 20 goals and keep you in the league, you're in for a fucking bad time. So they had to go and sign players. They've let Connor Cody go. He was there on loan. They didn't pick him up. I don't know if that's because they didn't want him. Spoiler, they should have wanted him. He's now playing in the Championship with Leicester. Just crazy stuff. I also want to add as well, though, another sidebar on terrible refereeing. This game, Leno, for Fulham, the goalkeeper, came out and went to, take a high ball. He misjudged the flight of it and fell over a player that was just stood still and couldn't have physically got out of his way. And Everton scored off that, and then the refs ruled it out. And again, just dog shit refereeing. There's no reason that shouldn't have counted. I hate how protected goalkeepers are. There's no reason for them to be this protected. It's ridiculous. They're a player on a pitch that has a special dispensation that they can use their hands. But beyond that, if they come out and side you down, it's still a foul. If they fucking come to claim the ball and fall on the floor and miss out, that's not a foul just because they need you in the back as they attempted to do it. It was ridiculous. And so Fulham got very lucky this game. It was pretty crazy. And then obviously as well, Fulham, they did get one here in the sense that, it was a nightmare defensively from Everton. They just all went to sleep at the back, and it was a free goal. But they're going to struggle this year, I think, Fulham, because of the Mitrovic situation. It's now confirmed that he's gone, he's bailed. Disgraceful behaviour from Mitrovic, frankly, saying he would never play for Fulham again if they denied him a move to the Saudi League. I'm appalled at the way he handled himself and handled the business side of it. Particularly, he could have gone out maybe if you leave to the Saudi League, you're never going to get a round of applause on the way out the door. But you think about all he did for Fulham. You think about how Fulham stood by him after he did a 10-match suspension for putting his hands on a ref and pretty much cost Fulham a European place last season. I thought they were very decent with him about that. They didn't condemn him publicly. And here we are now, and he's just fucked off. And so Fulham, because of the way that dragged out and took until the start of the season, Fulham have got some pretty big shoes to fill. I don't know if they are capable of filling those shoes. He had goals in him, as we know, but he was also just a big physical presence. He was one of the most savage hold-up players in the league. Like, that's no exaggeration. He was a throwback to like a Mark Hughes type character, all elbows, arms, big chest, strong, just backing into you, hurting you, shoving you around, manhandling you. Fucking nightmare to play against. And you know, those types of players, that there's not many of them around, you know, and so it's a big loss for Fulham. He was the real tip of the spear for them, and so I think they're gonna have some problems, but they got to win here. Everton, big trouble for sure. Now, I said we'd go back on Everton, so let's just jump ahead to the 20th of August, where they got absolutely brutalised by Aston Villa 4-0, and Everton were just not in this game at all. Now, keep in mind, as we've established, this isn't even peak Villa. Everton had no answer to Villa's midfield, which absolutely, you know, just dominated the game. You know, McGinn, Louise, Bailey, they were just all over this Everton team. I mean, McGinn in particular, that we've talked about in the past, really stepped up and, you know, filled that void and had a barnstorming game. Everton were chasing shadows the entire time and only managed 2 shots on target. There just wasn't anything to talk about from the Everton side of things, and you know, Calvert-Lewin got injured again, and he isn't playing. Like, look, I've said this elsewhere. I'll just repeat it briefly here. Fuck Calvert-Lewin. I think he's a joke. I think he's one of these players where you look at his injuries and you look at his work rate when he plays and you look at his attitude. I don't even know, man. I think he's just one of these guys who, if he ain't 100%, he ain't playing. You know, I just think he's a bum. And I hated his attitude, you know, when he had a nightmare again in the game at Leicester. This is when I knew I was 100% out on him. You know, he's on the fucking front cover of like these fashion magazines, you know, dressed like a clown. And you've got must-win games to stay up in the league. And they had a game at Leicester where he had a nightmare, you know, missed an open goal. I think he missed a penalty, if I remember rightly. And at half-time, he walks off and he's laughing and joking with Maddison, you know. And I just thought, like, yeah, fuck you, actually. Fuck you forever. Like, Everton have given you chance after chance after chance, contract after contract. They should have cut you loose in the same way that, you know, you should be the new Andy Carroll, basically, at this stage. But here you are again, and whoopsie-doodle, you're injured again, I guess, and probably going to spend most of his time on the bench or on the injury table. So, fuck that. And also, I did call this, but watching Bailey, they played Ashley Young. They played him at full back, but I might have been on the right this game. And anyway, I remember Bailey, like, you know, when I was catching this match, Bailey tortured him, and I did say Ashley Young, old man Ashley, you know, if Everton are signing him, that's a real bad sign, because he's going to get killed for pace. He's 38. You know, he's done brilliant to reinvent himself as a defender and, you know, extend his career, but it ain't happening against the better players, and Bailey absolutely abused it. So, I mean, look, Dyche came out afterwards and said, like, yeah, I could have took everyone off the pitch. I could have substituted everyone. Everyone was playing bad. So Everton are in for a really long season again. I mean, for real. Like, I don't know what to tell Everton fans. Like, this is the nightmare period of your club's history. Until you change the board, you're in for a bad time. And if you do lose any points to the financial fair play investigation, you're down. You're relegated. You can't afford to lose 3 points this season. It is going to be that close. It's another last day, stay up kind of season. So I'll back Dyche to keep you in the league, but if the FA dock you points, you're fucked. I mean, you need to make peace with that now, because you're not going to sign a good player between now and the window closing. If you do get Shea Adams, he's not going to save you. So I don't know. So anyway, those are my thoughts about Everton. That's both their weeks covered. I think as well, I did say we'd double up on the Newcastle talk. So just quickly, they went away to Man City. Man City won 1-0. It's a 1-0, I don't know why. 1-0 is correct. There was a bit of good news if you were a Newcastle fan, because De Bruyne, got injured. De Bruyne's out until the end of the year. And so you go, okay, City without De Bruyne, that's probably about as good as you're going to get. Holy shit, this game, it was just depressing to watch. They swapped everyone around. Like, Foden came in and was in the centre. He's played a bit of everywhere for City, and he showed that he can do it again. I mean, Newcastle were chasing shadows. Think about how good they were against Villa, and how you're talking about, Tonali, and then they went to City, and they were just second best everywhere across the park. Foden, man of the match performance through the centre, but Kovacic was a standout as well. Kyle Walker's still getting it done. You could have picked either of those two maybe, but they dominated possession. Newcastle only managed one shot on target the entire game, and as I said, they were just second best in the park, which is mental when you consider City had a midweek European game, and they came back, and they should have been tired, and there's no De Bruyne, and you just, Haaland as well was kind of anonymous in this game. He didn't get a lot done, didn't have a lot of opportunities. I thought the Newcastle defence did a good job of keeping him quiet. Still couldn't win the game. Still couldn't get a result. So, just what are you going to do? And I mean, I got to say as well, Alvarez's goal was sick. It was a fucking really nice build-up. City did create chances. I thought Pope did pretty well, made some key saves here. But ultimately, at the end of the day, City and my picks to win the league, I think with Gvardiol, it was super comfortable in this game as well. I think with Gvardiol, it doesn't matter that De Bruyne is not there. They are the team to beat in the league. And given Arsenal's start, and how Newcastle have looked, and Chelsea are a mess, and Liverpool are a mess, and United are a mess, how the fuck is City not going to win this season? It's going to take something insane. Talking about United, let's quickly jump into Tottenham beating Manchester United 2-0. Again, this took place on the 19th. This was a surprise for me. I did say after the Wolves disappointment that I thought Ten Hag, he's going to get it right. He'll change the system or he'll motivate the players. But Manchester United were all at sea in this game. It was very scrappy in the first half. It was disjointed is the word I would use from both teams. Obviously, Spurs are learning to live without Kane, but Postecoglou, to his credit, he has got a response from these players, and I saw things you wouldn't believe. Now, let's just start with the good for Tottenham, the obvious, like Maddison. We all knew he was a good signing. 40 mil, he's a fucking steal. Again, in an era of frauds, Maddison is tailor-made for Tottenham and was, like, say, value for money. Him and Mount, just as a comparison, there is no comparison. And Tottenham have got a very, very good player who's going to win them games this season, no doubt. The Vicario signing, I said I fucked with it when we were doing the Premier League review business. He looked really good at Empoli. Like, he is unconventional. He's one of those crazy keepers that do things where you go, that doesn't make sense, but he's not going to, but it's stopping goals going in, and it's stopping chances being created. And yeah, he's got a penchant for the flamboyant, let's say. But yes, he looks to be really good. He's a Premier League quality goalkeeper. Fantastic. So that was another test that Tottenham had to pass. And I don't know how this happened, but why was Basuma the best player on the park? How does that happen? Like, I don't know what Postecoglou said or did. Basuma dominated a midfield. That he was up against, like, Casemiro, Mount, Eriksen came on, like, what the fuck? Like, it's insane what I saw. So, I mean, Tottenham was certainly good value for money. I'm just going to talk about the bad. United are having a thing right now, and yes, you can all be cheering, and we beat United, and Postecoglou's here, and Harry Kane, you can do all that, right? That's fine. You still got long-term problems if Richarlison's your number 9. He was diabolically poor this game. Son, when he did the post-match interview, made a point of saying he held up the ball really well and he activated us. Son was straight lying. Richarlison was garbage. He did nothing in this game. He remains, as I said, Probably the worst signing of last season. 70 mil, I don't get it. Like, Tottenham didn't even need him. Kulishevsky coming permanently, he was great. Son was great. This is all fine, but you are going to need a number 9, and I don't know who it's going to be, because it cannot be Richarlison. It's not going to happen. On the other side of the park, United had 22 shots in this game. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. I thought United's best player was probably Varane or maybe Onana, Wan-Bissaka. I don't know. There wasn't a lot of quality in the attacking. Like, even Rashford had like a real quiet game. Now, listen, I think a lot of that's gonna change. It has to. It's definitely got to change when Højlund gets fit. But and Rashford gets into the left channel. You have to believe United are going to be a different prospect. But I don't know. Maybe Ten Hag has fucked this up with the signings or something, because they looked terrible against Wolves and were lucky to win, and they were terrible here. I mean, Casemiro doesn't look the same player at the start of this season. I don't know what's happened. I don't know if it was like, a point of pride last season to prove the doubters and he's took his foot off the pedal, or he's just getting old, or there's just better midfielders out there in the Prem now, or better midfield compositions. But he didn't look it. I was never sold on Eriksen as a United player. He's come on twice now for Mount, and he doesn't do anything when he comes on. But the big elephant in the room is obviously, there's two. But Mount's the new signing. Mount's the guy that they were all talking about. All the press was like, wow, Mason Mount's going to be a huge player, for United. He's got the legendary number 7 shirt. He's done nothing in 2 games. I mean, actually done nothing in 2 games, And I saw his brother was out there going, please leave Mason alone. It's terrible. All people did was link his stat sheet, which was all fucking zeros. This guy doesn't, he does nothing. Like, I don't get it. You've got Casemiro to sit back, so you've got the license to do things. Go do them, and he just isn't doing them. Like, I don't know if the shirt's too big for him, but you're coming from Chelsea. You're coming from Chelsea, where you used to play in Chelsea and you used to get the ball and you used to take the game to your opponents, shoot from distance, pass, blistering runs. Hasn't done that in his first 2 games for United. Done none of that. So I don't know if it's a system thing, but it's pretty telling to me when you look at the players they've got in the middle of the park. I don't even know. I couldn't tell you who had a good game. Like, I think Fernandes might be the best of a bad bunch. I don't know. Anthony, I think we can now say, is a also diabolically poor signing. 95 mil or whatever the fuck it was. And he is dreadful. I mean, he is dreadful for end product. I don't care how many of them little spinneroonies he can do. You've got to be able to ping a pass. You've got to be able to hit the target. That is what you were brought in for. That's what you were doing in the Dutch league. So, I don't know. I back Ten Hag. I think he's a fantastic manager. We can say, how can you say that when he signed these players and he's not making the system work? I've got to believe it's going to change. But this loss hurts them, and then that was followed up, I think, today. Luke Shaw's out injured now for a long period on the sidelines with a muscle injury. Don't really know what that does to their shape, and certainly their back line. So United not off to a great start. Definitely got some problems, and they're going to be hard to rectify all the while Højlund isn't in the team. We haven't talked about Chelsea yet, so let's talk about the funny Chelsea game on the Sunday on the 20th. You had West Ham beating Chelsea, and I said this is going to happen. Chelsea have signed every player ever in Europe, ever, spent $1 billion in like 3 transfer windows. What that means in terms of how Pochettino picks a squad, I don't know. They made headlines with, bringing in Caicedo, snatching him away from Liverpool, and they also got Lavia from Southampton last minute. So now they've signed like 3 defensive midfielders, when really what they need is an out-and-out striker still, in my opinion, because I don't know if Jackson's going to be it. But the best player for Chelsea is probably Sterling this game. and maybe Chukwuemeka, but he got injured, so he's out now. So now we are going to see more of Caicedo. They brought on Caicedo, £115 million player. He's chasing shadows. He gets into it with Paqueta. Paqueta makes a fool of him, or Paqueta, however you want to say it, and gives away a penalty. I mean, fucking nightmare debut for the £115 million man. And nothing changes the fact the best midfielder on the park was fucking Ward-Prowse. Ward-Prowse, 2 assists, went off to a fucking standing ovation. Told you he's going to be mustard for West Ham. Exactly what they needed. A reliable player from the dead ball and the set piece and in the middle of the park. Someone who, even at 28, is still going to run and chase things down. Great range of passing. And yeah, it's a great bit of business. Now, West Ham obviously have some things to keep their eyes on with the Paqueta stuff that's going on. He's being investigated for spot fixing because football and esports is just the same thing these days, I guess. But they could lose him. They could lose him for a long time. You know, you think about how long Ivan Toney was banned for. This would be a lot worse. There could even be pressure for the club to drop him. And there was talk about him going to City, if you remember. City and I think maybe United as well, for like 70 mil. And all that's gone quiet now. So you knew someone was up. It does look bad. I've seen the footage. I'll talk about that in more detail in a Premier League supplemental so you can get the lay of the land. But basically, West Ham, they look better than Chelsea. They looked better than Chelsea, and Chelsea have spent all this money. Now, when I say look better, Chelsea dominated possession. Yeah, of course they did. West Ham don't play modern football in tactics, but when they had the ball, and they had the ball something like 25% of the time, they went forward and they put defenders under pressure and they crafted chances. It was like, you know, that was what they did. They set up to play on the counter, and they did it. And guys like Bowen did it brilliantly, you know, leading the line. Antonio got his contract. Now he's playing again. Okay, cool. Fornals, you know, don't talk about him at all. You know, I spend most of my time talking about Ben Rama when he's on the pitch. But, you know, Fornals played fucking sick this game. So, I mean, West Ham looked really good, hard to break down. And Chelsea, you know, I don't know where they finished this season. I think it's another nightmare for them. Well, Pochettino has to tinker around and figure out what a starting 11 looks like for Chelsea. It's going to be different when the who comes back. I think he's going to be a godsend. I think he's going to be the guy that gets Chelsea the goals this season. But, yeah, I mean, listen, Chelsea continue to be an embarrassment. And after 2 games, they've only got a point. You know, with all that money spent and all those players brought in. So, womp womp. Right then, I guess that's enough. We'll do a proper one of these, you know, on camera, talking about the games and all that, but we're all up to date now, finally. There'll be a supplemental. I want to talk about the Greenwood stuff as well. I think that's important. You can't leave that one on the table. You know, so United have handled that terribly, and it's been in all of the headlines. So, yeah, as always, thanks for the support, the content. If you're one of the football fans and sports fans that supports me, keep an eye on the Substack for articles about the Premier League over the course of the season. There was a one about Jordan Henderson on there you can go and catch. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Until then, take care.